So the latest Marvel Snap leaked cards are here, and we're going to take a look at all these cards expected to land in the August season and then rank them from the ones I think will be the best to worst. And boy, let me tell you, they're all the best. This video has some crazy cards in it. I mean, super strong stuff we're going to take a look at here. That said, these are not final. Since these are data mined cards, they can always change. We usually see 1 or 2 changes from this stage into the final version, and I absolutely think that'll happen here because some of these numbers seem really pushed for how powerful they are. So let's go ahead and kick things off here with Hawkeye, Kate Bishop. So Kate Bishop is a 2/3. On reveal, add 2 arrows to your hand. And you can see all the arrows here. Before we even get into the arrows, I just want to talk about how good this kind of effect is. Just having a reliable thing to play early on, just get that body down, get some tempo, and then get good, surprising resources in hand, because your opponent's not really going to know what you get, what to play around, but they also just really fill your curve nicely. Sometimes you don't have the perfect curve. You have space for that 1-drop to weave in. And some decks account for that by running 1-drops, but you don't really love running 1-drops in your deck necessarily, right? You'd rather run big stuff, synergistic stuff, game plan based stuff. So just having this way to fill in so easily is really nice. Not to mention, of course, we know having hand size can be valuable for things like Loki's, and having 1-drops can be valuable too. We've seen like Zoo decks, for instance, we're having some bonus 1-drops. Like this could also be a synergy. We're also going to see 2 different new synergy packages in this video, one of which supports 1-drops in a unique new way, and one of which supports spending all of your energy in a given game or turn. So Hawkeye, giving you that kind of way to fill a turn 2, fill in on like maybe turn 3 or turn 4 with these flexible arrows. That's actually going to be really nice for cards we see later in the video. So I'm just saying, at a baseline, a card that makes you 2 things that can fill in your turns, that's already a great option. Like, a lot of decks are going to value that so much. When we look to the arrows themselves, some of these are absolutely insane as well. The Pym arrow is a 1/1 ongoing if your side of this location is full, +3 power. That's a little bit smaller Ant-Man, which you might say, hey, it's just worse than Ant-Man. That sucks. But again, remember, you don't have to run the Ant-Man. You're getting all of this stuff bundled into one. So it's okay if it's a little bit worse. You're still, just kind of getting this free resource almost. So it's fine that it's still a 1/4. Like, that's really good for a card added to your hand. Similarly, the grapple arrow is a 1/3. This is on reveal after you play your next card, move it to this location, which sometimes that move stuff can be pretty interesting. At the same time, this could be a little bit limiting. Sometimes you might not want to stack all that power up, or may want to play a card that doesn't have to succumb to that move. So that one's a little weird outside of move decks specifically, but still probably good because it's a 1/3 and you can kind of play around that sometimes. And then the basic arrow is a 1/1 on reveal if you play a card at this location next turn, +3 power. So that is essentially your Hawkeye, which again, solid 1-drop. This actually could be, in a bounce deck with some of this on reveal stuff. It's probably not likely, but bounce a Hawkeye, bounce a basic arrow, you got yourself a little package going. And then finally, the acid arrow is a 1 -2 on reveal, switch sides, which that's insane. Like, that's really good. That kind of, if you squint, makes Hawkeye a better like Green Goblin, because for 3 total energy here, you're getting +3 and -2 for your opponent. That's a net of 5 power for 3 energy. Green Goblin's a net of 3 power for 3 energy. So it's like kind of 2 free power swing here when you hit that acid arrow, while still, of course, occupying your opponent's board spaces, which is often one of the big upsides of the Green Goblin. So acid arrow is like A+++, insanely good. This is kind of, looks a little bit like a White Widow or a Green Goblin, a little more expensive than White Widow, but still a ton of upside. And then I think, the basic arrow and the Pym arrow are comparable to really good 1-drop options, which again, the great news is you don't have to run the 1-drops. You're getting that flexibility, that curve fill without the deck commitment. This just looks like one of those really good flexible 2-drops, probably similar to something like Nico, which is maybe a lazy example, but that Nico, that Snow Guard, I think it's in like a kind of a Jeff space where just a lot of decks value running the Hawkeye Kate Bishop. So maybe not the most flashy card in the video, but for a season pass card, I do expect this one to be played a ton. And it looks very fun too, for the record. So next up is quite possibly the most obscene card I've ever seen in one of these videos. I just do not see how this ships at this state. This is Marvel Boy. It's a 3/3. After each turn, give 3 of your 1-cost cards +2 power. Now, I want you to imagine you play a Squirrel Girl on turn 1. You got 3 1-cost cards. You play this on turn 3. After each turn, not once, after each turn, it's going to give 3 of your 1-cost cards +2 power. That means your Squirrel Girl herself becomes a 1/4. And each squirrel becomes a 1/3. So he's already added 6 power to the board on turn 3, plus his 3 power. He's a 3/9 on turn 3 already, effectively. Again, it's spreading the power out, but his total output is 3/9. The next turn, it's another +6. He's now a 3/15 effective output. The next turn, it's another +6. He's a 3/21. The next turn, you're now on turn 6, right? He puts out another +6. You're at a 3/27 in total power output if this works this way. Each turn, 3 cards get +2 power. Am I reading this wrong? Like, you can't have a card that puts out 3/27 in power that only requires one other thing, a Squirrel Girl, or whatever mix of 1-drops. I know you're saying, hey, Killmonger exists, Regis. They're gonna eat all your squirrels. Well, Kyera exists too. Throw a Kyera down. You don't need any other cards. You're going to win the game basically off of your Marvel Boy and your Squirrel Girls. You're going to have a 10-power Squirrel Girl, a 9-power Squirrel, and a 9-power Squirrel if you play this on turn 3. Like, you're already off to the races on a really good game plan. And of course, you're going to support it with other stuff too. So this just looks completely insane to me. This has to go down to like +1 power. Even +1 power would still be adding +4 to 3 cards, right? That's still an extra +12, making this effectively a 3/15. This just looks nuts to me. Like, the total power output is crazy. This would make Zoo insane. Brings Kyera back too, probably, because you have to dodge removal in that case. I just don't see how this card isn't insane in this state, though, man. Like, yeah, there's some risk, like this comes down late, or there's some risk you don't hit your 1-drops in time, but it's not hard to play at least a couple 1-drops if you build your deck correctly by turn 3. But here's the secret: even if this came down on turn 6, I still think this is a good card. It's 3/9 in effective output, even on turn 6. Even after 1 turn, it still does a lot. So I don't know, man. This just looks crazy to me. Like, this looks super meta defining strong. Am I reading it wrong? Like, I don't understand. I have to be reading it wrong because it looks so crazy. So next up here we have Wiccan, and this is kind of introducing that new like spend all your energy kind of archetype, almost a reverse Red Hulk, if you will. Maybe every deck is this archetype thanks to Red Hulk, but you get the idea. Wiccan 4/5 on reveal. If you've spent all your energy this game, +2 max energy. So on turn 1, you got to spend 1. On turn 2, you got to spend 2. On turn 3, you got to spend 3. And then if you've done that, on turn 4, you slam your Wiccan, and you're going to get +2 max energy, kind of a super Electro sort of effect, Corvus Glaive sort of effect, so that on turn 5, you're now going to have 7 energy instead of 5. So play a 4 and a 3, play a 6-drop and a 1-drop, whatever it might be. You're just really ramped up for those final 2 turns. I think most importantly for ramp decks, you like playing 2 6s, sometimes getting that double 6 oomph is really nice. This is maybe a little more awkward because sometimes I think it's hard to sort of fill a curve with like a 6 and a 1. Like I said, that can be a bit clunky. Sometimes that 5 6 6 from an electro curve standpoint might feel a little smoother. And the conditionality here is a little challenging because with a normal ramp package, it's guaranteed. You play Electro, you know it's going to work. You play Corvus Glaive, you know it's going to work. Occasionally might backfire with your discards, but you know it's going to connect. Your Wiccan, you don't know if it's going to connect. Technically, you might miss. Now, there are some ways to mitigate that, of course. You could run a Quicksilver, you could run a Domino, you could run a stack of 3-drops or whatever to make sure that your Wiccan hits. I don't know that running bad cards is going to necessarily be worth it. You could also just try to build your deck in a way where it's very unlikely you miss, but 1-drops in particular can be tough if you have too many 1-drops. So I would probably have to feel like I play a Quicksilver. Maybe for 2s and 3s, you feel like you just run enough density that you're guaranteed to get there. A couple 1-drops for like filling in the gaps here and there. But you also need that big payoff. You need the late game to be worth it as well. So There is a little bit of weirdness. Do keep in mind things like Sunspot don't work. At first I was like, oh, Sunspot, he just always spends all your energy, but that's not actually how Sunspot works at all. He gains power when you don't spend energy. It's literally the opposite. He's not actually consuming the energy to gain the power. So in that case, you know, the conditionality here makes you nervous, but at the same time, you know, you feel good about this energy ramp. It's just so significant for those final 2 turns. So it becomes, I guess, like a deck building challenge. It becomes a construction issue for this one as much as anything else, like finding the balance of hitting the condition and maximizing your payoff with high cost stuff. And I do have fears that that's not necessarily going to be worth it. I think the ramp decks that we have nowadays have relied on extreme consistency and have kind of foregone their early game to make sure that late game packs so much punch. You can't do that here with Wiccan as easily. There are some things like Zabu, you know, where you maybe cheat this out a turn early to help it get done. So I like that this makes you think about the game in a little bit of a different way, but I'm just worried the consistency is going to hold this one back. It's just going to be hard to always make this work. And that's really interesting in the context with our next card as well. This is Speed. It is a 3/3 with ongoing +1 power for each turn in which you spent all of your energy. So again, another card that's rewarding you here for wanting to spend all of your energy. But the great thing about Speed is it's not an all or nothing binary result. Like Wiccan, if you miss, the Wiccan just fails, right? It's yes or no. The Speed, if you miss a turn, okay, who cares? I lose +1. I'm not thrilled, but my card still functions. It still works. I have, you know, 5 other turns to help scale up my speed and feel good about that. There's also this interesting world where when you play these 2 cards together, in some cases, you know, we talked about like that awkward 7 energy turn. Maybe that's hard to fill in sometimes. If you Wiccan, you know, your speed may not be as easy to achieve. You may have some awkward final couple turns, or your speed is having a harder time connecting. So I don't know that these necessarily even go together, although, you know, they definitely could work out just fine if your deck is built correctly. And again, you know, stuff like Kate Bishop filling in the gaps, you know, those little flexible cards in hand helps do all of this sort of stuff. So Speed, of course, you know, it's going to look retroactively at your first 2 turns. So sometimes you play this on, you know, turn 3, it's already going to be a 3/5, and then, you know, you've got 6 total turns. So this can get up to a 3/9. Magic can get this up to a 3/10. It is also ongoing, so there are some ongoing considerations as well. I do like that this card just rewards you for playing the game the way you want to play the game. Like, you want to spend all your energy. That's the fun thing to do, and it's nice when card designs reward you for doing the good sort of thing. So is there a really cool curve where you can play Quicksilver, Domino, Speed into Wiccan, you know, and have like this awesome, you know, hit? You won't always hit the Speed on turn 3, right? But it's a fun idea, right? Like, that's a cool little build for a sort of deck. Now, I will say, you know, how often does this get up to a good, healthy range? Because you want your 3s to be like 6 or 7 power to really feel worth it as just stat sticks and not having other sort of benefits. So if you think about like Red Hulks, how many times do those Red Hulks hit? Usually like 1, 2, 3 times per game. That's not necessarily in a deck that's built to avoid those sorts of triggers, but I do think there will be a lot of instances where this lands as like a 3/6, a 3/7, because you just whiffed or things didn't go well. And sometimes it's not just about filling your energy, it's playing the right card at the right time. You know, you don't always have the luxury. Sometimes you need to play this thing here at this moment because this location's shutting off or whatever, or your opponent has a card, you need to react to it. And that might sometimes limit your speed's ability as well. So taking 1 or 2 power off the top end of this, where it's in that like 3/7 range, it's good still, it's solid. But would you rather run a Gladiator? Would you rather just run a 3/5 that had some kind of benefit? You know, would you rather have a Nocturne in your deck than a Speed? It might be, again, that it's just too conditional or hard to maintain. This one might need the number pushed a little bit. These 2 cards, while really interesting in some ways, I don't know, I have questions about both of them. They aren't as absolutely insane as something like Marvel Boy, it looks to me. I almost said Marvel Boil again. Why do I do that? So then finally here we have the Emperor Hulkling. This is a 6/11, and it reads: at the start of the game, copy the text of a random 6-cost card. So my goodness, there is quite a range of 6-cost cards whose text this can copy. There are some that seem like really good to me, like Blob. It just gains extra stats. It's a Blob that starts at 11 power. That's nuts. Like Leader, completely insane. Your Leader starting at 11 power is absolutely crazy. A Galactus can be absurd, right? Just having an 11 power Galactus sometimes. But there are other ones that just aren't really, doing much, or could even be like actively detrimental. Like maybe you don't want Living Tribunal's text on your Emperor Hulkling. That could actually hurt you, making your power a little bit too flat. I guess it could technically get Agatha. So it could be in your opening hand and just become an Agatha that is even smaller than Agatha and, kind of ruin your game plan. Like an Infinite would be bad. You don't want an 11 power Infinite, right? So I just scanning through this, I don't know what the actual numbers are, but it looks like about 50-50 kind of good hits versus bad hits. And I guess maybe it's more like a third that don't really do much of anything, like Apocalypse probably doesn't do anything. Onslaught's like probably hard to utilize. Spectrum sometimes hard to utilize, right? Where this is kind of just like a 6-11, which is that's okay. It's starting in a nice healthy spot. It's probably a third bad, a third neutral, and a third good. I guess the question then becomes like, are the third that are good so good that you gain like a really nice advantage? On top of that, can this be something you just sort of throw into a hella list? And maybe it's, kind of risk-free in a way, like even the bad hits aren't necessarily terrible sometimes in a hella deck because you just need big bodies and big stats and stuff. It's going to get discarded or what anyway. Maybe that's good when it gets Apocalypse's text as well, right? The good news too is that like this is at the start of the game, right? It's not when you're playing it that it transforms into something. So you are going to have the advantage of choice. Like you're going to be able to see what this is and make a determination about whether or not it's useful. So if you're willing to tank the occasional like dead draw effectively, because it's like, oh, this became, what was the bad example I gave? This became Destroyer or something, and I can't play a Destroyer. That's fine. I'll just keep it in hand and play something else. If that's tolerable for a deck that this is in, then the moments where it turns into a Doctor Doom or a Leader or a Blob or whatever will certainly be worth that exchange. So I actually think this makes a pretty interesting 6-drop option for decks that are already running big stuff. It also just looks really fun, like getting to make those decisions at the moment. It's like, ooh, I got Ultron, interesting. Or like, ooh, this is a Sasquatch this game. How can I support my Sasquatch? Or like, oh, this is an Orca. How can I make this guy big this game? And like changing your game path to fit that is nice. It's also notably rather surprising for your opponent. It's going to be hard for them sometimes to predict exactly what you have access to. Normally when you kind of play into an archetype or a deck list, you say, okay, this is this kind of deck, they're probably doing this sort of thing, this is the kind of 6-drop they're going to have. With Hulkling, you don't know, man. Did they get the Arnim Zola? Did they get the Blob? Did they get the Doctor Doom or Galactus? You just don't know, right? You have to be ready to adapt. So that gives you that kind of informational advantage, which can be really nice when it comes to cube equity as well. Just making sure you're able to take advantage of those informational disparities rather often. So I think this becomes a rather intriguing 6-drop for all of those reasons. Basically, some extra flexibility and upside that probably overcomes that downside risk. All right, so that said, let's go ahead and rank these cards from best to worst. Marvel Boy is the best. This is just like completely insane to me. I think this is a typo. I'm like concerned I'm not reading this correctly or this doesn't work the way I think, because these numbers are just obscene. My number 2 card is Hawkeye Kate Bishop. I just think this has a ton of flexibility and nice raw output. Acid Arrow is also insane. My number 3 pick is Emperor Hulkling. I think this is a surprising and flexible 6-drop option. My number 4 card is Speed. This one rewards you for doing things you want to do. That said, might need some help to outclass other 3-drops with just like good, strong effects that aren't just stats. This is basically just stats. And then my number 5 card here is Wiccan. Although this offers a ton of ramp potential, I worry about the conditionality here. This is a very binary effect. It either works or it doesn't. And the games where it doesn't might really hurt you in this case. Or just demand you build your deck in too strange of a fashion. Yeah, there you go. The August month of cards. These look really fun. Kate Bishop looks good and fun, like having these, you know, variable paths throughout a game. For the same reason, actually, Hulkling looks really fun too. It's kind of making decisions on the fly. Speed and Wiccan, kind of a neat little new archetype, the anti-Red Hulk. And then Marvel Boy, I gotta be reading this wrong because the chart, it's just off the charts strong. It's crazy powerful to me. This is gonna get changed, right? You can't. Isn't this too good? Am I crazy? Like, is this too good? Like, tell me what's going on here. It just seems insane to me in my brain. But anyway, yeah, curious to hear your thoughts on all these cards down in the comments below. Thanks as always for watching. Stay tuned for the final versions of these cards when we do the official card reviews later in August. But until then, yeah, thank you, and until next time, game on.